success, be nobleness, and ever again divine.
Hey, thank you for joining once again. These fireside chats has been very engaging. We've been having some great talks. And now we're going to talk about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, something that's actually very important. And a new policy went out just on it. It's equity. Equity is something that is very passionate with a lot of people. People on both sides of the aisle are really looking at this. And what we're going to do is we're kind of going to deep dive into what equity is and what is it causing as far as the benefits and the negative effects of equity. I'm honored to have Mark Spooner here. Mark Spooner, I've been looking at his resume here. Probably the smartest man, well, definitely the smartest man in this room right now. He's a Virginia native, and he graduated from Georgetown University with a bachelor's degree in government, graduate from University of Virginia in law school, and he practiced in a major DC law firm from 1970 to 2005. He has an amazing story. He's never been an activist. We were just talking about this, but he kind of became concerned with what was happening as a resident with the school boards. So we're actually getting an idea from a community member that actually took time to study what was going on and kind of came out with his own conclusion. He has a blog that and postings that he puts up, and fantastic reading. So if you ever get a chance, please go to his social media and really dive into what he's been saying. So with that, Mark, thank you for joining.
Happy to be here.
Okay, great. I mean, your resume is amazing, and I want to make sure that we get the exact website or social media that you do all your work on. What is that again? So
it's called Fairfax Schools Monitor. And all those words together, Fairfax Schools, plural, monitor.com. And when I learned something about what's going on in the schools based on my investigations and so on, I usually write an article and post it on that website.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know I read some of the postings you have over there, and my team has definitely read a lot of that. I was amazed that you're willing to come on. We did have Dr. King on 6/5. We reached out from our campaign to ask if partake.
She's the head of the equity office.
Yes, she is. She refused to partake in it. She gave us a couple of liners saying that this is not something for her to do. We are going to continue to try to reach out to her and have her join us in some of these podcasts to really dive into what this equity is all about, especially after this last policy. Now, this last policy that was kind of pushed out last minute over here without a lot of parents really understanding. Let's talk a little bit about that. I know you were very, very fired up about it, and we got a petition going out. Give me your take on it.
Okay, well, maybe it would be helpful to go back to how all this started.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It actually goes back to about 2020, and the school board then was talking about establishing what they called an anti-racism, anti-bias policy. And a lot of the intent of that was to put more indoctrination into the curricula.
Yeah.
More about systemic racism, about white privilege, about getting everybody to look at their individual identities, whether you're white or black or Hispanic, or what's your sexual orientation, and all these different groups competing with one another. And it ran into problems because the school system had a controversial issues policy, which said that teachers shall not teach controversial issues in the school. So they said, well, we really want to do this, so we're going to have to amend the controversial issues policy. Well, that got all bollocksed up, and they couldn't bring it off. And so in July of 2022, they started a new process, and they said, we're going to develop an equity policy. And I've been following that ever since. Now, equity is one of those things it sounds so good.
Of course.
Equity, equitable sounds like fairness.
Yeah.
But it means very different things
Mhm.
to different people. And uh, to the equity crowd, they use it as uh, as sort of a catchword for
Yeah.
all of the things that they want to accomplish. From changing their curricula, like I've just said, to doing anything to achieve equal results,
Yeah.
even if they're not real equal
Yeah.
results. For example, they're talking about changing how grades are administered so that the lowest possible grade you can get on a test is 50.
Oh,
So if you have
yeah.
25 questions and you get one right, you still get a grade of 50. So they can then say, look how performance is coming up because nobody had
Yeah.
lower than 50.
Yeah.
So it's just a whole range of things that are proposed
Yeah.
under the idea of
Yeah.
equity. And so I've been concerned about
Yeah.
that from the beginning and trying to do what I could to try to make sure they're focusing on consensual ideas of equity, in terms of opening up opportunities where they don't exist, or if there are access barriers, to removing those barriers.
Yeah.
I think everybody would agree to those kinds of
Of course.
concepts
Yeah.
of equity.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the general process, and just
Mhm.
recently they've come out with this proposed policy, which is very problematic.
No, it is. And, growing up myself in San Diego, I grew up in Title I schools. I didn't even know. That's how deep you're just into not understanding. So as a student, I didn't know. I just thought everything was owed to me. And so I never knew the damage it was doing to me, as far as having a feeling that things should be given to me. That when I was a kid, I thought my world, this is it. This is my world. This I'm not going to have any more than what I see here. And it's because subconsciously something's driven into you that you're going to need help for the rest of your life. You're not going to achieve anything else. And personally, I grew up with a little bitterness, thinking, me being a minority, why can't I be rich like the white kids over there? Why can't I get everything they get? And it was this subtle thing that was kept putting into me because I grew up in a progressive area. I grew up in San Diego, very progressive. And it was something that was pushed into me that didn't change for me personally until I actually went into the military and started doing things for myself, and having good mentors to tell me, you are more than what this is. You can achieve anything. And I tell a lot of people this. If I had a time machine, I went back in the time and told 15-year-old Tony, this is what you're going to do. Your career, going from the military to the Secret Service to CIA, briefing directors and senators and ambassadors on security issues. He would tell you that's not true. That's fantasy land. That will never happen for me.
Right.
And what I see is, what are we doing with our kids when we're telling them or doing policies that are shaping our kids, but mentally, is it telling them you're not going to achieve enough on your own, that you're always going to need somebody to help you out?
Right, exactly. You get taught that the system is against you, which is what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes an excuse for failure. And what they really ought to be doing is telling kids, if you get an education today, forget slavery of the past, forget Jim Crow. The world is open to you, and you can do whatever you want to do if you apply yourself and you get an education. That's what they ought to be being taught.
Yeah, and they should. I just had a fantastic event I went to. It was the Juneteenth Jubilee, and Dr. Woodson talked over there, and phenomenal. I don't know if you ever heard him speak. And he talked strictly on diversity, equity, and everyone feeling bad for the community. And where we're at now, there's so much that's been given for us in our country. But now we have a breakdown to where the government wants to come in, implement certain things, tell certain segments of people that you can achieve, and they're starting at the young age. And to me, it's an epidemic that's going through. It's not just in Fairfax. It's everywhere. You're seeing this everywhere. I have family still in California, And when I see some of the things I come across, and it's some of my nephews and nieces, I see some of their schoolwork and different things or what's being told to them, it's unbelievable. And I try to uplift and say, no, work hard, strive to be the best. You're going to fail. That's part of life. I learn more off of my failures than any
Yeah.
success.
Right.
And it builds character. If you're able to pick yourself back up and say, no matter what is thrown at me, I'm going to come back. I'm come back better. I mean, that is to me what America is made out of. I mean, with 1776, when we fought against the best empire in the world, we were against all odds, and we worked. We strived for our independence, strived to be, the American dream,
Right.
or what we want, the establishment of the United States. And to me, that's the values of America. That's why people come from all over, immigrants come over for that chance to become better. And what I'm seeing is, so these immigrants are coming over, and then right away they're being told, you're never going to achieve. And it's, to me, it's like, this is exactly what a lot of them are trying to escape. And we're doing exactly right here. And I hear a lot of immigrants saying that. It's disheartening.
Right. Yep.
So, talking about this policy and everything, and we talked a little bit about um, the ill effects it's having on the kids. You did write a couple points right here, talking about the policy, breaking it down. I mean, obviously, I look at this and I was like, he must be a lawyer. So, give me a breakdown of what this is. I know a lot of people signed it. I signed it. Give me a breakdown, and give the breakdown to the community, to the parents, and what we're trying to do here with this, and
Okay.
what are we trying to accomplish.
Okay. Well, first of all, if you don't mind, it might be helpful to step back a little bit. When the school board started this process in July of last year, and they had a work session, and they recognized at the meeting that this term equity is a very loosey-goosey term, meaning different things to different people. And the school board directed the staff to come up with a definition of equity that would avoid all the controversial aspects. Focus on the kinds of things that people agree upon, not all of these left-wing, concepts.
Yeah.
And the other thing which they directed the staff to do, they said, this is going to be a controversial process. So we need to make sure that the public is fully engaged in the development of this process at every step of the way.
Yeah.
Turned out neither one of those things were followed. The final definition, which we can talk about here, is one which sounds like a manifesto and talks about injustices and so on. But also, this was done in a secretive process. They'll tell you, oh, no, we got input. But this draft equity policy was not issued until 5 days ago.
Yes.
Nobody outside of the school system, unless, some insiders, and the public never saw this until 5 days ago.
We got a little thing of Mr. Finn coming over here. Mr. Finn just wants to say hi at times. So Mr. Finn loves his equity also. All right, buddy.
They put it out last week with the idea that they would have a work session, which is tomorrow night, and then a final vote would be taken a week from yesterday at a formal board meeting, providing absolutely no time for public input on what is a very controversial, potentially very controversial issue. And they've done this deliberately just so that they could ram it through without real public engagement. So they put this thing out at 7 single-spaced pages. And it's got, all kinds of definitions of terms.
Definitely does.
And it basically says that this policy is going to be the most important policy of all the dozens and dozens of policies in the school system. We're going to use this policy to determine how resources are allocated, um, uh, how things are taught,
Mhm.
and it will prevail over everything else. Well, one problem is just a week ago, the school board adopted a strategic plan,
Yeah.
which is intended to guide the school system for the
Mhm.
next several years. That was a very inclusive process involving hundreds of meetings and
Mhm.
thousands of contacts with thousands of individuals, and it is an equity based plan.
Yeah.
Um, but a concept of equity
Mhm.
that may get controversial in some respects, but basically focuses on opportunity and access.
Yeah.
Um, uh, then along comes the equity team. Everybody's got to have their equity team
Of
in
course.
today's
Yeah.
world, and they're out there working on their own with their own agenda. And now we're about to adopt a policy which conflicts with the strategic plan in
Yeah.
many respects. I don't think the board has even talked about this. Why do we need a policy when we already have a strategic plan which is based on equity, that sets what the equity goals are for the
Mhm.
next several years, and talks about how we're going to get there, and sets up the parameters for measuring whether we're getting there? And so uh, a serious question is, why do we want this? They've got a different definition of
Mhm.
equity in this policy than they do in the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Um, uh, they say here that this focuses on not the needs of everybody,
Mhm.
but the needs of those who are marginalized, as they define it, and that those who are marginalized are going to be the focus of all the attention of the school system in the next several years.
Mhm.
Well, it's fine to have efforts
Mhm.
to bring up those who are underperforming,
Yeah.
but you can't have the whole focus of your policy or your direction based on those who are doing poorly.
Yeah.
With the vast majority of people want the best education for their kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
even if they're not underperforming. The parents of the high achievers,
Yeah.
they want their kids to be challenged and to be pushed even harder.
Of course. Yeah.
Um, so the way this thing is written, it raises just all sorts of questions um, about how does it relate to the strategic plan?
Yeah.
What does it really mean? Um, for example, the term equity is uh, defined in terms of the people
There you
who uh, are. Where do we
go. There
put
we
this?
go.
Yeah,
Right there.
it's defined in terms of disproportionate
Mhm.
outcomes. So we're going to do everything we can to end the disproportionate outcomes. Well,
Mhm.
what does disproportionate outcomes mean? Does it mean that we're going to do whatever is necessary to make sure everybody gets equal grades?
Yeah.
Um, it is some difference between the achievement of an English language learner group
Mhm.
and those who have grown up speaking English. Is I think it's inevitable that there will be
Yeah.
some difference in achievement between those two groups.
Yeah.
Is some difference going to be recognized as proportionate,
Yeah.
or will all
Yeah.
differences be called disproportionate? So it just is very, very troublesome.
When I was looking at this whole all this stuff over here, when I look at this group, this chief equity officer, and the new people that they're hiring for equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is such a subjective thing that people are randomly saying, okay, you need equity, you don't. So where does it end? And there's a couple of things I saw in here where it started talking about affirming. I can't figure out where it's at right now, but it's saying that part of it is also looking at affirming. So in the social aspect, is this also more of a social thing that they're trying to do?
Well, I'm not sure. They use terms like culturally appropriate
Hmm.
and affirming different identities and so on. A lot of that to me is mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
Um, uh, And sure, you don't want to say, we want everybody to become just like middle class white kids, and there
Mhm.
are some cultural differences. But as far as education is concerned, what we should be focusing on is
Mhm.
teaching kids to read
Yes.
and to write,
Yes.
and to understand the history of the United States, and so on. And
Mhm.
rather than focusing so much effort as this school board has done over the past 4 years on all the ideological issues. I mean, if you go to their school
Mhm.
board meetings
Oh, I
over
have.
the last few years, it's like every meeting there is something to do with, you know, um, transgender policy, or uh, you know, uh, identity, and all these kind of things. And very little attention at the meetings,
Mhm.
anyway, has been devoted to how are we doing academically.
Yeah, and when we start looking at all these different issues, that takes away from the main goal, um, which is educate our kids. And they keep pushing this policy of equity, but yet talking to a lot of Latino families, they're not getting the support that they need. If we're talking about equity, the money's not going those at certain areas. Talking with, I'm talking with a lot of Latinos that are actually in these school systems. Their kids are there. They're not getting the same amount of support. I think we were talking earlier. There's a 21% dropout rate for Hispanics coming out of high school here in Fairfax County. So, are we giving them the support that they need, the kids, to be able to achieve? Are we telling them that they could to achieve anything? And then you couple that with what happened with the big controversy in TJ. I mean, you are taking away from a segment to not have another segment.
Yeah. See, that's another manifestation of, quote, equity,
Yep.
is that here we have, what, 28 high schools or
Hmm.
thereabouts in Fairfax County, and all or most of them are excellent high schools, and kids can get an excellent education. They can take
Hmm.
AP courses. Uh, can't we have one high school which is devoted to absolute academic excellence, that's pushing the kids
Hmm.
who are most ready for high school? My one of my fears is that if we take kids and put them in on semi-quota systems, which
Yeah.
the new policy does, one to two things is going to happen. If you're putting in kids who aren't as academically ready as some of these kids who are, have great math and science backgrounds just going into high school,
Hmm.
these other kids are going to struggle to keep up.
Hmm.
Whereas if they went to one of the other high schools,
Hmm.
they might thrive.
Yeah.
The other thing would be, okay, well, let's look at the statistics. Oh no, these kids that we put in under the quota system, they're not doing so well. So we need to squish down the rigor of the program
Hmm.
to make them succeed. And I think one of those two things is going to happen. I have no faith that the school board is going to do an objective study as to how this program is working. But to me, it's just a very sad thing that we can't have one high school that focuses more than
Hmm.
anything else on the highest possible standards for the students who are most ready to take the rigorous high school curriculum.
Yeah, and those merit scholarships. You started looking at that big controversy with that. You're actually taking away from a segment that worked hard. Now, obviously, the school board superintendent saying there was no there. Uh, working the government. And you being the lawyer also, when you start blocking and not allowing information to be shared, there's something there.
Well, I don't think I've mentioned this to you, but I have a lawsuit pending against the school board right
There
now.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think anything less from a lawyer.
Because I asked for the full report. What happened
Yeah.
was, when this controversy arose, the superintendent came out and said, "We're going to do an independent report. There are going to be no holds barred. We're going to let them develop the facts and determine the facts, interview whoever they want to interview, and
Uh,
they're going to give us a report, and we're going to share the results with the public." And when the report came out in May or whenever it was, a few months
Yeah.
ago, they came out with a document that was very defensive in nature, saying, "Oh, it's so unfortunate that these terrible people raised this issue at all. It's been such a burden on our employees, and
Mhm.
and the report determined there's no basis for any of these concerns." Well, the way it was written, it just sounded, maybe there's something more there. So I filed a request under the Freedom of Information Act. Well, show us the real report.
Yeah.
Don't just give us your own snapshot summary, giving us what
Yeah.
you want. And then they said, no, we can't give that to you.
Yeah.
So I filed a lawsuit, and it's pending in court right now.
And it's amazing what their reasons was when I heard Dr. Reed's reasoning was security. They want
Right.
to protect names. Now, working in government and knowing that material has to be released to certain people that don't have access to certain things, you can redact a lot of things out there, such as names. You can redact names on documents. So when I think about that from a security aspect, well, one, who name are you trying to protect? I mean, I don't think this is a terrorism case or anything.
No.
It's a
I mean,
study of what
they
happens.
claim, and I don't know, that people were harassed, and they used the word threatened, and I don't know, what the facts were, but I think some parents were obviously outraged when they heard that their kids who had won these academic awards hadn't been informed about them in a timely manner, and that the parents were never notified. And when they informed the kids, they just sort of slapped it on their desk, without any fanfare, rather than praising these kids for their great accomplishments. And so I'm sure there were parents who were outraged at the principal, and so on. But I can't, it's hard to believe that at this point there would be much further. And in any event, we're talking public employees here.
Yes.
To reveal what public employees did goes with the job.
Exactly.
And there's not an exemption in the Freedom of Information Act for wanting to protect your employees from having revealed what they did. So I don't think the school board has a valid basis for withholding this information. And then on top of that, they came out and said, well, here's what they found. Well, once they say they're revealing what's found, they've waived any privilege that they might have had. You can't say this is what they found and then say, well, we have to hide the results of what the fact finders actually found.
Yeah. And when you start looking at it, it just really doesn't sit well with a lot of parents. I know that the AG has tried to get the information, and they're blocking him doing it, and they're spending extra tax dollars. And these lawyers aren't cheap. It's coming out of our budget. And when I start seeing these things that are happening, me being a person of security and want to take care of the mental health issues and different things that are really affecting our kids. When I see this kind of money going into those areas, because you want to cover up certain things, what are we doing? Where's our priorities at?
Right.
And I think we're going to get down to the nuts and bolts of what happened. I know they're going to drag it out with lawyer fees and everything. I can tell you day one, when I'm elected on that board, I'm going to go ahead and take that document and release it out. There's no reason. I'm going to vote with the rest of my colleagues. I know we're going to have a landslide, and we're going to fire those lawyers, and we're going to release it right away. There's no reason why not to have transparency. If everything's on the up and up, then it should be good.
Right.
But what I see is happening is really taking away from a segment of people, a group, a culture, and just because you want to level the playing field somewhat with some sort of feelings on that, so kids don't feel less about themselves, but you're taking away from one group that's worked so hard to achieve that. And reality is, it's a lot of the Asian Americans that are dealing with this stuff, and we're talking about South Asia cultures from the Korean, Chinese,
India.
Indian, the Muslim community works, that they instill their kids to work hard and really achieve, and you're taking away from that segment. And for what? At the end result, what are you trying to achieve? You're trying to make them feel bad or make them look at, no matter what, now I try hard, I'm not going to get a fair shake. So there's a lot of, to me, psychological things, mental things are happening that we're doing to our kids. And I think it's going to have an ill effect in the long run. And when I look at it from a leadership standpoint, what kind of leaders are we building if we're doing that? We can't celebrate the accomplishments. If a kid just sits there and says, I can't celebrate someone else's accomplishment because it makes me feel bad. Right? Or that kid could say, you know what, I'm celebrating their accomplishment, and you know what, I want to do that too.
Right.
And they achieve
Right.
for better.
Absolutely.
But it's a domino effect. It goes into, everything in society, and now we're creating a society where kids are just not caring the same way. And I think with that, we got to be very careful. I'm honored to have someone like you that's working so hard and tirelessly, all free of charge. You're doing it just because you're a citizen here, you're concerned. That's going out there, following these things, and in following up, challenging, writing up um, your petition right here, which was an amazing petition. So what's the next steps? What are we going to do?
Well, on this particular issue, there's actually a school board meeting tomorrow evening,
Okay.
going from 6 to 7:30. I'm hoping that they will start that discussion with whether they should really proceed on the current schedule.
Mhm.
A group of 33 of us wrote a letter to the board last week saying, look, you said this was going to be a collaborative process, that the public would be engaged. We just now got this 5 days before the meeting. You need to take a pause, set up a procedure for actually explaining to the public what's in here, allowing people to contact the school board members and express their views, raise the questions they have, the concerns they have about it. And maybe as a result, if you allow input from somebody other than the insiders, you'll realize that there's room for improvement in any policy that we have. I don't know whether that's going to happen, given the way that it looks like they're trying to ram it through. They'll probably proceed to the next step. And what that is, it's supposed to be at a work session, is we go over this policy carefully. We study it as a board, raise questions about it, and make amendments to it. The way they've set up this schedule, that can't happen, because they've only devoted an hour and a half tomorrow to this. And as you can see from the analysis that I've done, there are dozens of questions that could be raised.
Oh, yes.
You can't have a meaningful discussion at a school board meeting about what the issues are in an hour and a half.
No, you can't.
So, if they don't postpone the schedule, then I suspect that they're just going to plan to ram it through. There is a school board meeting scheduled for next Monday at the school board headquarters. The meetings usually start at 7, and this will start at 7. I'm hoping that people will show up at that meeting you can't, unless you've signed up in advance for one of the 2-minute speeches, you can't hold a rally inside the auditorium and so on. But I think it would be good for people to show up. The meetings are usually not very well attended because, parents in the evening have their responsibilities, and people are just getting home from work. So I always I attend every meeting that I can. I'd like as many people to come to these meetings as possible, but I understand that that's not going to happen. My fear is that they're just going to ram this through, and then they'll move on to the next thing. But between now and November, when the elections happen, I think there are going to be several more of these issues. I think, what is it? Only 8 only 3 or 4 of the 12 school board members are running for reelection.
Yep.
And I may be wrong, but I have a feeling that the 8 or 9 who are not running for reelection are saying, well, we don't care anymore what the public thinks. We're not going to have to stand for reelection anymore. Let's just vote through all this nonsense.
Yeah. But you know what? A lot of those school board members are actually running for higher office. This election is actually the biggest elections we're going to be having in Virginia for a long time. Every local election, every local seat is up for grabs.
Right.
Going to state and going into Senate for the state. Everything's up for grabs. Even water and soil is up for grabs.
Right. But the word has to get out. I mean, I think November, people have to turn out. I mean, this is not a presidential election year. We're not electing our U.S. senators or members of the House of Representatives. So, a lot of voters don't go to these off year elections.
Yeah.
And I think the only way to really change what's going on in the Fairfax school system is for the public to realize how important this election is.
Yes.
And to realize that they need to turn out. And it's, I've always thought school board, it shouldn't matter whether you're a Democrat or whether you're a Republican. I mean, why should it matter? I mean, whether I'm a Democrat or a Republican, what I should care about is my kids getting the best possible education. But and so I think that we're in a county where the majority typically tends to vote Democrat, but I don't think most of these people realized when they voted in 2019 to put these 12 people in place that they weren't just Democrats, but they were far left Democrats with real radical agendas. And I think people have to realize that and vote not on the basis of, do I normally vote Democrat or do I normally vote Republican, but what do these people really stand for? Do they support all of these radical ideological things that the current school board has been doing?
Yeah. And you mentioned, November 7th being very, very important, and a lot of Democrats just vote across the board. I'm actually reaching out to a lot of Democrats, and a lot of Democrats, when I talk to them about the issues and they start learning about the chaos is happening and COVID, for however bad it was, actually opened a lot of eyes to a lot of parents, and they're seeing what is happening now. They're taking a better look at the school system and what they're getting. With a budget of $3.5 billion, you think you get a better return on investment.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was running my company that way and I had shareholders and invest $2.5 billion in me, but you're going to get no return if you want, you'd be out of business. But I think, the next step, we can rally. We have to get together. We have to go to these school boards. We really have to put a voice out there. We have to have concerned parents speak on what's going on, and we really need to clamp down on this. I mean, they're investing more and more money into this equity, diversity, inclusion office. I think they're going to hire another 4 into that office. But what is the return on investment? What are we trying to do here? If we have our schools in shambles right now. There's 800 trailers that are being used across all the whole county. 800 trailers. We have kids, and some of them special need kids are in these trailers. Are we protecting them? Is there equal protection? If you want to talk equity, if there's an active shooter, do they have equity in that standpoint? You could talk about this in every aspect, but when you start looking at what's the purpose of this equity team, that we're investing so much, that's going to go into the millions. I told a couple of at a town hall, I told a couple of constituents that day one I get hired on, the whole equity division is going to be gone. I'm going to disband it and take all that money and put it into school safety. Those are things that I actually want to do with that, because I just, when I look at it, like I said, growing up in a impoverished town in the ghetto, I felt that I couldn't achieve, and it really affected me. And so, and Mr. Finn is really mad right now, but it's all right. Um, it really affected me, and when I look at the kids and start seeing them, and especially me being a foster parent and having a child that was at risk, he had that internal mentality that he couldn't get any more achieved, you know? So I don't understand, for me, living a life where I was told that I couldn't achieve anything or slowly put in, and then having the at-risk child, how this equity division is even going to help. It
Yeah.
just seems like it's just going to provide more barriers. It's just another bureaucracy that we're adding in there. And, I just recently saw the stats of pay, and the increase of staff. I mean, the increase of staff of administrators is almost 4 times as much as teachers.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. Why do we need so much administrators? I just don't understand. It's just, when coming from the government, yes, I understand. Like, we had a bunch, and back then I didn't understand why we needed so many. But seeing now in the school system, we need more teachers. And then some of those salaries, how about giving that to our teachers?
Yeah. Yeah.
So now we could have competitive wages, and we could retain our good teachers and let them teach, instead of pushing down all of these equity, diversity, inclusion, all this other stuff that serves really no purpose, creating these offices and spending all this money. Let's put that into education.
Right.
And I'm just not seeing that. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say that having a small staff, a person or a person with an assistant who says, "Look, here are things that we can do to expand opportunities." I think, to think in terms of expanding opportunities for students who are falling behind is a good thing, and having some group of people who think in those terms is a good idea. But the problem with the equity office is it's not just focusing on that. It's focusing on all of these curricula things, about teaching, about divisive concepts, and
Yeah.
and getting into all these collateral issues. And it is a big division. I don't know
Yeah.
how exactly what the budget of that office is, but from what I've seen, it's not small.
No, it's not small. And when I was in school, we had guidance counselors that kind of helped you, guide you, work with the kids to get them to into certain programs, to really work with the kids to see, okay, where's your strengths and weaknesses, what's your desires, what you want to do, kind of guide you into that. Me personally, I'd rather put more money into guidance counselors and this big bureaucracy that is this overall czar
Yeah,
that's
that's a very
going
good
on.
point.
We don't need it. And also with that, it sounds like a lot of it with this school board, and especially with this equity pushing us through real fast. It sounds like, more of that big government. We know what's better for you. Just listen to us. We'll guide everything for
Right.
you,
Right.
which I think a lot of Americans now, after especially coming out of COVID, has looked at that as, that's not how I want
Well,
to live
I
my
mean,
life.
if you go back to the governor campaign a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
that issue was what got Governor Youngkin
Yeah.
elected, with his opponent McAuliffe saying parents shouldn't be telling the schools how their kids should be taught.
Yeah.
And parents don't like that concept that the school system knows best,
Yeah.
and they want to have a say.
Yeah.
And uh, the current school board that they don't believe in that concept. It's interesting. When you go to speak at a school board meeting, if you ever saw it,
Yeah.
see it on the YouTube films or whatever, they have the citizens who are speaking to the school board shown with the back of their head at a camera that's at the back of the auditorium. They're
Mhm.
trying to depersonalize the
Yep.
speakers, and then as soon as the speakers get done, and the superintendent gets up to speak, well, then they show her engaging face, from a front view and so on. I mean, that's just a small thing,
Yeah.
but it's indicative of how they barely tolerate the citizen input.
Mhm.
You only have 2 minutes to speak, and it's very difficult to make any kind of substantive point in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But they sit there, politely, but I often have the view that it's sort of going in one ear and out the other, and that they already
Yeah.
know what they're going to do.
No, and I agree with that. When I started looking at current school boards, I did speak, I think, at two of these events, and the cameras in the back behind you. Um, it's really doesn't serve any purpose because they're not listening. Yeah, I think when I spoke, one of the people, part of my staff, you know, was taking videos of the school board, and you can see it's just complete disinterest.
Yeah,
And it's because we've created this mentality that our elected officials know best, and we need to just listen to them, blindly follow them you know, like lapdogs. And that's not the case. You were seeing a lot of people, and I think with this next one, especially with the equity coming out, I think we could really rally a lot of people to come out and show support for this, for going against this, uh, because this is a disservice. I mean, what I'm seeing and hearing from a lot of community members is they're dissatisfied. They're not getting what they want from the parent from the school boards. They're not getting what they want from the schools. There, a lot of family traditions are being taken away, and we live in a very rich and diverse community, full of traditions, and they feel that those traditions are getting trampled on. And I'm with them. You know, the concept of school is to educate our kids so they can be successful adults, not to try to put social norms into them. That should be taught from the families. Every culture from uh, the Indian culture to the Muslim culture to the Hispanic to Asian American culture, they're all different. But what binding thing that I found, and coming from those cultures, is this family nucleus, where family is the most important thing. And you start seeing with what the school board's doing with the equity and telling your kids that they can't achieve, or they're trying to achieve and then holding them back down. It's a breakdown. Then you start
yeah,
adding in all the other stuff that's being
yeah.
told to them.
If you look at some of our coins, it has the motto on them, "A pluribus unum," which is Latin for one from many. In other words, people come in from all over the world, and they assimilate into one people with one set of values:
Hmm.
democracy, family, and so on. And a lot of what I see happening in the school is teaching, no, you're not all one, you're all different. And
Yeah,
there are conflicts between you based on your race and your sex and your sexual identity.
yeah, and that is, I think, the most terrible thing you tell a kid, that we're not united. And I see that all the time, where these divisions are just being created.
Yeah,
And now you got this segments where students are fighting back. You're also getting segments of parents fighting back against
yeah,
it, and then
yeah.
it's
I mean, what I see is, people are always saying, well, we need to teach history, all of it. The people who say that generally are not talking, either don't know what they're talking about,
Mhm.
or what they really have in mind is something different. They don't want to, what they want to do is not teach history, but they want to say, because of our history, here are the social programs that we need to promote today.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they're really talking about.
Mhm.
Um, uh, when I very first got into this, the very first thing I looked at, because they were talking in the campaign, the gubernatorial campaign, are you teaching critical race theory or aren't you? I didn't even know what critical race theory was.
Yeah.
So I did some studying about what that was, and I thought, well, why don't I get the history books and the civics books and see what is actually in what is being taught.
Yeah.
It was very difficult to get them, actually.
Mhm.
I had to go down to the school headquarters to see
Mhm.
the textbooks. But these are not textbooks from Jim Crow or from the 1950s. I mean, they're very modern, and they do teach all of history and so on. But then I learned that what you have to do, that you can't just look at the textbooks. What you really have to go to is what are the equity people and so on trying to put into the curriculum of what is actually taught. What are they sending out to the teachers as
Mhm.
to what should be the focus?
Mhm.
And that's when I really started getting appalled,
Mhm.
because if you look at the unit guides for teaching 11th grade US history in our schools today, almost every lesson from the early colonial period through the founding of the Constitution, through the 19th century, the 20th century, is talking about, power, privilege, identity,
Mhm.
and discrimination. And it's just, it comes across as a single-minded focus on what's wrong,
Yeah.
as opposed to a more balanced approach, which would focus on, yes, we're not a perfect society.
Mhm.
We've made a lot of mistakes. There have been injustices in the past. But on the other hand, look at how far we've come, and look what we've tried to do. And
Yeah.
and I think that aspect of it gets downplayed by the people who want to sow divisions.
No, and I see it all the time where, and like I said, growing up, that subtle thing was put into my head. Um, it's kind of like this reverse racism that I felt angry towards Caucasians because I thought they all lived in Beverly Hills and had all the money and everything. That was put into my head. And it's a disservice because it's creating division in there. It's creating uh, hate between groups,
Right.
subtle hate at a young age, and kids really don't know. It wasn't until I actually went into the military where I actually started meeting people from all over the country. And then we found that we had a common bond. And the
Right.
common bond was love for our country and love of service. I always believe right now, even right now, we can fix everything because I think there's more that bonds us together than divides us.
Right.
We just have to get through all this nonsense of division. When you tell people, you're owed this because ancestors and everything, you're taking the power away. You're saying that because of everything you're dealing with in life, it's because of what happened to your ancestors in the past, and you're never going to get ahead. It's always going to be like this. And we see some amazing, African American role models out there. Dr. Ben Carson, I think he's the one of the most phenomenal men I've ever been around, second to you, obviously. But his story of his were you able to read his book? His story of his mom working hard,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and his brother's a rocket scientist, and he's a brain surgeon. I mean, that is American dream.
yeah.
And strong mother, African American mother, strong to tell her kids, work hard, achieve. That's the only way you're going to make it. And look what happened. Worked hard, achieved. And not enough of those good role models
Yeah.
are being pushed out there. A lot of it that comes out is, especially with our youths, and we're not talking the African American community, we're talking about the Hispanic community, especially in the Hispanic community, that you're not going to achieve anything more than what you see, and that's it. And then we're going to point to other people and tell them they're the reason why. It just it creates this small seed of
Yeah.
hate in
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
That
Well, Tony, you got a good message. And the real issue is getting it out to people. And
Yeah.
I liked what you said in terms of really trying to reach out to people who vote Democrat,
Yeah.
because I think this election should not be
Mhm.
an issue of are you registered as a Republican or are you registered as a Democrat? You need to get people focused on what's really happening in the schools, and are is the current school system really focusing on the fundamentals of education that we want
Yes,
them to be
definitely.
focused on?
Definitely. Let's see. We got any questions, Mary, that came on in?
Yes, we
Oh, we
did.
do. I can't look at it.
First question that we have
Is it for me or Mark?
I guess it would be for both of you.
Okay.
We would like to know why the Chief Equity Officer of FCPS, Cardos Inc., declined to participate in this.
That's a good question. I think honestly, that goes with the current administration. The lack of transparency. We've already seen it. Yeah, we've seen it with TJ. We've seen it all the way through it. Everything. We're seeing it with this equity policy. Lack of transparency. The funny thing is, they actually have another thing they did. They hired a company to come in and do a security assessment. It's been over a year. They still haven't done a security assessment, and they won't answer to why they won't make any upgrades. So I think it's this, for me personally seeing, I think it's a matter of you not being important. And that's the hardest thing, because this right here is a forum for everybody. And that person is actually a public servant working for the county. What's your thoughts?
I can't speak for her. I mean, I don't know why, I think, I don't know.
Well, me being a politician now, I will speak. I think, Dr. King, I think the community is very disappointed that you did not join us in this conversation to kind of get down to the grassroots of what's going on and explain this policy and defend this policy. I hope in another venue, another time, that you'll be able to take that chance to explain to the community. And I definitely do invite you to meet me at any venue with any of these communities I speak with, and let's talk about this equity policy, what we're doing in schools, and explain to them how this is going to help them. Because as a public official, you have to sell this policy to the people, not vice versa. So, I challenge you with that. I like doing challenges now as a politician. Any more questions?
Yes. Is this the same or just an updated version of the One Fairfax policy?
That's another good question. I think that the One Fairfax policy is a countywide policy passed by the Board of Supervisors, but it applies to all aspects of county government, including the school system. And I think a legitimate question can be asked: why do we need this 7-page single-spaced document when we already have the One Fairfax policy? I mean, some people might take issue with the One Fairfax policy, but I think a legitimate question is, what, if anything, does this add to what already in the policy? And then beyond that, you have the point that I made earlier, that the board just a week ago or 2 weeks ago adopted this strategic plan, which sets the equity goals as well as the academic goals and the administrative goals for the school system for the next several years. That's what we should be looking at in terms of what the equity policy is. You set up a bureaucratic system where you have a separate equity office, and they do their own thing. It takes on a life of its own, and I've been arguing to the superintendent and others throughout this process. These are like two ships passing in the night. You've got one definition of equity in the equity policy and a different definition of equity in the strategic plan. These have got to come together sometime, and they never did. I was able to assemble a group of citizens who went in and talked to the superintendent, I think back in February or March, and we asked her that question about why is this needed, and shouldn't this all be part of one process? And at that time, she said, well, I'm focusing all my attention on the strategic plan. And to me, what's in the equity policy is, just sort of going off on the side. And she didn't seem to be willing to or interested in getting personally involved in the development of the equity policy, at least at that time. Maybe she did later.
Yeah.
But here we have a one Fairfax policy, a strategic plan, and an equity policy, all addressing the same thing, and they're not in sync with one another.
Of course, that's you got too many chiefs and not enough Indians
Yeah.
going on. Any other questions?
Is there a fact sheet about the policy?
A fact sheet.
If you go to my website, fairfaxschoolsmonitor.com, I posted, I wrote a piece last week. You go to the website and there's a button you have to hit. It's the blog, and my most recent entry includes the actual text of the policy. So there's a link to the actual policy. As far as my analysis of it, we sent a letter just yesterday to the school board, and I'm going to put another piece on the blog after tomorrow night's school board meeting. I want to wait and see what, if anything, they do. Whether they set up a new schedule or whatever. But I've written up a list of issues that the policy poses. Tony has it, but I haven't put it out on the website yet. But I'll do that in a couple of days.
So we did put the website up on this live stream, so I implore everyone to go on that website, really get educated on what's going on. He does break it down perfectly. What do you expect from a lawyer? Any other questions? Okay. Well, this was very informal. I think we had some good questions come out. This is just the start. I mean, it's the start of a long battle. That's going to lead up to November 7th. But I think we could actually do something tomorrow. I think, we could actually get some people. I know I'll be there. It's at 6:30 at the.
It's 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. And what location?
It's at the 8115 Gatehouse Road in the Merrifield area of Falls Church. That's the headquarters building.
Okay, and we'll pop it up on here right now. But I implore everyone tomorrow, 6 o'clock at Gatehouse. Let's get there. Let's show our faces. Let's have them hear our voices. This is very important. I mean, if we want to take the steps to show that this school board cannot act like this way, they can't unilaterally just push out policies without having convincing the public how this helps them. Then we're running into nothing more than a pseudo dictatorship that's just telling us what's best. This isn't the American way. This isn't the way a free society works, especially where a government works for the people, not the other way around. So I implore everyone, 6 o'clock at the Gatehouse. I know it's hard to get to. I know you have things. I think purposely they do these at certain times so they can. Once I'm on school board, to make it more convenient, I'll put it on a Saturday, put it on a Sunday, when parents are off, not at 6 o'clock, knowing that parents get off at 5 and they have to go through traffic. So purposely, I think they set these things up so we get a low turnout. But everything you can do, please come out. If you have to call in sick because your stomach hurts or something, maybe it's time to take that sick day and show on up. I'll be there, all my followers, if you can, all my supporters. If you please make it out there, let's try to get as many people out there. I know you mentioned that hardly anyone shows up, but we're going to be there to support you. I mean, this is your personal quest, and you have my utmost respect for what you're doing, but you also have my allegiance to try to get to follow you in this quest to try to get to answers on this. Any closing thoughts? Any words?
Nope.
All right. Well,
been good.
It's been good. Thank you, everybody. We had a great discussion. If you have any follow-on questions, please go to Mark's website. Follow on there. Can they reach you on that website also? Can they reach out to you?
There's a way of reaching out.
Okay.
I'm always looking for people who have experiences. Their kid comes home and says something, that concerns them. If my teacher was doing this, that, or the other thing, or they showed me a video today.
Yeah.
And when parents have concerns about what's going on, there's a way to contact me confidentially to give me information.
Yeah. And this is important. So my closing thoughts on this is it takes warriors like Mark and what he's doing on his own accord to try to stop the injustice that's happening. And it takes us to follow him. I'm running for school board, and I will win and be on that board. But good leaders are good followers also. And when I see someone like Mark that has a quest, has a desire to make a change, and it's time for me to step up and give my support to him. So I implore everyone that's sound my voice, please join us, join on this. We can sit back and let this happen, or we can stand up and do something about it. We're stronger when we're together, when we have one voice. We're weaker when we're divided. And that's exactly what they want to do, divide us and control us. So I say thank you and God bless.
Perfect.